divorce, depression, debt. There is a black male mental health struggle.
Anxiety and stress that comes from being a black male in white spaces is due to racism.
The mental health system is failing black men, and no one is talking about it.
It's not imposter syndrome. It's not I need to worry about. No, it's the cost of being black in all majority white spaces.
Dr. Kurt has spent decades working with young black boys and men, only to discover the harsh truth.
A lot of bureaucracy and politics on top that really prevented me from teaching black boys like I knew that they needed to be taught.
Therapy, as we know it, isn't built for them.
Sitting with the heavy emotions when it really burned like hell. And when it doesn't feel good, just wait. Just wait.
In this episode, he breaks down the dangerous myths, the cultural blind spots, and the urgent need to finally listen.
We are born into this world feeling unsafe. I feel empowered.
Have you ever wondered what masculinity even is in the modern era? Are you ready to move beyond the macho bully or the soy boy archetypes? I'm Marc Azoulay, and this is the Men's Therapy Podcast. Together, we'll explore how neuroscience, Jungian psychology, and Buddhist philosophy can transform your life, your marriage, and your business. Are you ready to deep dive into the minds of men? Let's begin. Hello and welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Marc Azoulay, and I'm here with Dr. Kurt. He's an author, a speaker, and an educator. He's a psychologist that's out of Atlanta. He recently started a bi-monthly men's wellness circles that he runs for local community there. And I'm really excited to talk to you because you really bring a not often spoke about perspective around masculinity, around cultural competency, the African-American experience, and I think what young men need out there today. So Dr. Kurt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate you having me. I'm so glad to be here.
So I want to start you with kind of a question we start with everyone is your personal story. Like how'd you get into this work? How'd you get into being a psychologist and being interested in masculinity and men's work?
Great question. So this is actually a second career for me. I started off in education. So I started out right out of undergrad as a classroom teacher in Chicago public schools. I had a classroom mostly of young black boys, a few girls, but I was one of the teachers, young black dudes from the same city, from the same town, and the principal put me into one of the toughest situations and knew I could handle it. So collectively, I've been working with black males about 30 years, right? After I became frustrated with public education, I made it all the way up to a principalship. And then I realized that there was a lot of bureaucracy and politics on top that really prevented me from teaching black boys like I knew that they needed to be taught. And I was privileged to be bused from a lower community to an upper middle class community in Chicago. So I'm well educated and I know what quality education looks like and feels like. And I wanted to bring that back to underprivileged black boys. So when I walked away from education, I jumped in the business world here in Atlanta, did really well. And then I found myself going through my own mental and emotional challenges. Somewhere around, I'd say about 12, 13, 14 years ago, I went through what I now call an eventful divorce, right? I lost both my parents. My mother was in Chicago. She retired. I moved to Atlanta to work with me and for me. She succumbed to cancer and, subsequently passed away. Then my dad passed away. I've always had a unique relationship with my dad. The marriage crumbled. The economy tanked. I had most of my efforts into real estate at the time. And so I found myself just in a downward spiral. I even considered just ending it all from time to time. And I had experience with therapy. My mother was ahead of her time, so she sent me to therapy in high school. So we're talking the mid 80s. To come to find out, it really became family therapy, right? And at the time, they didn't use the therapy word. They used mostly counseling because counseling involved really being active in your treatment approach. And it also involved, your whole family, the extended relationships that caused many of the breakdowns. So when it came to my world, when it crumbled and I lost everything, I had to go to therapy. And I went to 5 different therapists. 4 of them did not resonate with me. And I had given up on therapy. I had given up on life. I was homeless. I was sleeping in my buddy's basement. It was just a real tough time. I had to spend a couple months in jail. I'd gotten behind on the child support. It became really, really bad. Lost all of the cars, everything. And essentially I just gave up, Mark, right? I just said, well, I've done it. And it was a good friend of mine who really promised me that I'd go seek one more therapist. And that's what I did, against my better will and judgment, but I'm glad I did. So I made a promise to it that I would go see one more therapist. And it was this therapist, right? Now, mind you, this last therapist was a middle-aged white gentleman. I go in, right? I sit down, and let me preface this by saying the other four were African-American therapists, right? A unique spin, right? So none of them clicked with me. I go to this white gentleman. He's middle-aged. I sit down. I know the drill, right? I sit down. I give him my story. I'm well rehearsed in the story now. He leans back. He didn't take any notes. And after about 45, 50 minutes of me sharing my story, he leans up and asks me this question I'll never forget. He asked me, have I ever considered becoming a mental health practitioner? Those weren't his exact words, but he was like, you ever thought about becoming like a therapist or a counselor? And I was so thrown for a loop, Mark. I literally remember sitting back, shaking my head, and I leaned back up to him and I said, look, man, I'm not here for career counseling. I'm here for you to help me. I missed the whole thing, right? So he goes on to say, no, hear me out. Let me tell you. He says, I've been doing this for 35 years. I'm about to retire. He says, I've been working with Black individuals, African-American gentlemen, families for years. I haven't been able to reach them. I don't think the current mental health industry can reach them. He said, but somehow I think you can. I said, why? He says, you're not clinically depressed. He says, you're pissed. You're angry. You're rageful. You're sad. You're disappointed. He said, but that ain't clinically depression. He said, that's the unique experience of growing up in this country as a Black male. They sold you on a dream, right? They said, keep your nose clean, go to college, go to graduate school, get you a wife, make some kids, get the house, the American dream. And when the rug was pulled from up under you, you know, you became very disheartened. And he just spoke to me, and no one ever said it like that. So needless to say, Mark, I walked out of this office. I was more upset than when I walked in. But I noticed like two or three days later, I started feeling different. Now, I didn't know I was feeling better because I was stuck in this rut, but I started feeling lighter. And about the third day, I said, you know what? I think he may be onto something. He says, look, I can't help you, and I'm not asking you to give up on therapy. I'm asking you to become who you're looking for. He said, I think your healing journey will be you helping other African-American males. And I said, that's crazy to me. He was like, yeah. He said, let your healing come through serving. And he said, how much schooling you got? I was like, well, I got a master's. I dropped out a few PhD programs. He was like, consider going back. Can't be that much difficult. And I did. And it changed my life. And I'm here today. And so I used my entire second path of my career with both of them, serving African-American males with a unique experience on what it means to be Black and male in this country at this time. And that's how I'm here.
Dude, that's a great story. There are so many different threads that I can pull on from that. But I think I just want to ask the question that's, top of my mind is, how does our industry fail Black men, right? Because I talk in this podcast a lot. I think our industry fails men in general. And my assumption is I think it probably fails Black men more, right? Because there is that other unique part of that experience. So let's just dive right into it. Like what are we missing as an industry? How are we not reaching people that need help?
Well, for particularly Black males, we collectively have failed to acknowledge the entire humanity of what it means to be a Black male in a Black body, Black mind, right? And we have marginalized them, right? Not just as a race or people, but as human beings. And we've deduced them to how well they can perform, right? Even within the Black community, right? We have been reduced and deduced to being performative, which means we have mistaken our self-worth for our self-value, meaning the value that society places on us. And so, yeah, those of us who have been in trouble and, been hurting emotionally and mentally and found ourselves in some tough spots, we can attribute that to like making the bad decisions. But then there's some of us who've done what we were sold to do and life punched us in the face anyway. And so I don't think the culture, the world, the industry is equipped, knowledgeable, and experienced enough to really, really approach Black men. And it's a holistic approach, right? There's some uniqueness, right? There's some listening. There's it's a variety of how we speak to the Black male body and mind and spirit and soul. And that comes with a lot of work, even for me, being in there, walking the walk, talking the talk. There's still some skill sets along with my naturalness that's required. And so what I do mostly at this point in my career, Mark, is I spend my time in a lot of places dispelling myths. Right? Teaching people on the things that they get wrong on what it means to serve Black males in the current mental health space.
Yeah, let's dig into that. What are some of the myths? I mean, maybe I can have an opportunity to learn from you, but yeah, what are some of those?
Correct, right? So we use a lot of pop psychology to sort of blanket what we think Black men or Black males need, right? So there's misconceptions like Black men don't talk, there's hyper and toxic masculinity and things of that. Women are more emotional than men, and none of those are true, right? Men haven't been listened to for the sake of being listened to. Men have been listened to, and then partway through the listening, it's, why don't you do this? Have you tried that, right? It's a fix-it approach. But because all of the trauma and pain is stored in the body, it has to be outward. It has to be let out of the body, right? Otherwise, the mind will try to process that. So most men, 99% of the men whom I work with, Mark, they just haven't been listened to. No one has sat on the other side of any space and just listened to them for hours on end. Just let them get it out. Let them hear themselves, right? Most Black men, when they don't get it out, they hear a compilation of voices from their early childhood that's really disruptive and disturbing. But when you allow a Black man to just get it out, he'll actually hear himself. And he'll be able to challenge and soothe and disrupt some of his own patterns of thinking. But the number one priority is to be heard, right? The number one priority is to be understood. You have to build intimacy before a Black male can feel safe. We are born into this world feeling unsafe, right? The minute we show up, everybody's like, okay, do this, don't do that. Right? And so that's the reality. But to answer your question in a nutshell, Mark, most Black men, most Black males haven't been heard.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, right? Like, how do you get Black men, or maybe just men in general, into therapy? Because I find that's a huge issue, right? Is like my guys, especially once they start and they're working with me or an associate or they're in a men's group, once they get it, they actually love it, right? They stay, they're like, oh man, I've never been listened to. I've never had this type of attention. Like they love it. But getting them there, I think, is really difficult. And I have to imagine that there's still a very significant stigma in the African-American community around therapy, right?
It is. It is. So the two best ways that I know how is to share one's experience on their therapy and to go with.
Yep.
Right. So two of the best ways. One of the best ways is to share, what your personal experience was like in therapy. We all learn through stories, right? We'll extract what we need by hearing someone else's story on how they have been able to really improve by way of therapy, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is, which most people don't admit, you could go with them. You could literally go to the office, right? As long as everybody is a consent, you could log on to Zoom or whatever and just start, even with the intro, right? And so it doesn't have to be official therapy with a treatment plan attached for a loved one to say, I want to go to the first session with you. I'm going to learn if there's something I could do to support you, right? And so those are the two best ways. The other stigma is, Black males don't generally trust what's known as the white coat syndrome. So we don't want to talk to anybody unless it's critically necessary.
Yeah.
Because of our previously lived experience. So that's the fear, right? And then the second part is, we have our own ideas of what it means to talk. So we'll minimize and be like, I don't need to talk to somebody who doesn't know me, blah, blah, blah. So those are a few things. Now, what really gets them into it is someone who looks like them, who says, yeah, man, this is what I got from it. This is what I learned. Not you should go to therapy. Here's what I got from my therapist. And it really, really changed my life. And so what happens is, they'll move at their own pace. Sometimes the average man takes 6 to 8 months before he gets in to see me. He'll tell me, I've been watching you about 6 to 8 months. I was coming. And then today I decided to call you.
Yeah, the same thing. People that listen to the podcast, right, that have just been kind of waiting and getting value until they decide to make that call. Because I think there's a huge barrier. And I love what you're saying about mentorship and role models. I think that is needed. I think we need especially a lot of male mentors and role models that are emotionally intelligent and benefit from therapy. But let me ask you this, right? Like, what are some of the challenges that Black men today are facing that they could benefit from having therapeutic support?
A number, right? I think one of the best ways is men could learn. So here's a unique trauma perspective for Black males, right? When things become very heavy and disruptive, we tend to think that we're alone, right? Our trauma experience is mostly, oh, this is just happening to me. I'm all alone with this. This is a unique experience for me. I was there. Right? It's only when we talk and listen to and share with other males who look like us that we're like, oh, okay, this is a thing. I'm not really just losing it. Well, I am, but on a different level. But I'm not alone. Like, this is not like something that is uniquely mine. And it's in that community, right? Because we can share pain and discomfort communally, right? Like most of the Black males I know, they've been through some challenges. The challenges that they were all alone were more traumatic than the same challenges when they were with their buddies or their partners or their homeboys on the streets. Right? And so that part, right? Just knowing that this is not just me.
Yeah. That you're not alone and that other people struggle in the same way. I'm certainly ignorant to the Black experience. What I'm drawing from is the book of Boys and Men, which you may be familiar with, written by Richard Reeves. It's a lot of research study that's actually based mainly on Black men, and they talk about the lack of father figures and the lack of mentors. Can you speak a little bit to that? Like, is that something that is really prevalent in the Black community today?
It is. I think it's overused like most things, right? And so, the stats, there's research to suggest to say just because the Black father's not in the home doesn't mean he's not actively involved in the rearing of the child. I actually had that misconception with my own dad, right? And so right, like my parents were divorced. They got divorced when I was young. They lived 2 separate lives. And I adopted this story. I'm raised by a single Black mom in the hood on the south side of Chicago. I had to get it out of the mud. My dad wasn't there. And when I got older, right, much older, it simply wasn't true. Now, I'm not speaking for all men, but what I am saying is many of us have adopted certain circumstances and narratives that weren't always accurate. For me, my dad was active in my life. He wasn't as active as I wanted him to be, so I put him in this box that he couldn't even get out of until long after he passed. So that's the first thing. I challenge men on their stories, right? And just not diminishing, like asking, is that even true? Is it accurate? Are you open to seeing it another way? Let's say it is true. Unpacking the emotionality around the stories is very, very helpful. The other part I assure men in, I work with a lot of different men groups, is to allow men to forgive themselves and their fathers, right? Because here's the reality. None of us can get it from just one man. I don't care if you're white or Black, right? Black boys don't get everything from one dad. Asian boys don't get everything. We get bits and pieces from the males that we come in contact with. So whether you have the best dad or no dad, no one man could provide any of us with all that we need. That's why we have mentors and coaches and uncles and godfathers and things of that nature. So let your dad off the hook. We don't get to hijack our fathers as if their entire existence is based on fatherhood. It's just not. They have their own lives, right? And I'm not advocating for absent dads. What I'm asking men is to revisit some of those old stories that keep them stuck emotionally.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And I like that you talked about like the power of community, and I think especially male community, because yeah, I find that's like the biggest thing that's lacking right now, just in America in general, is like you don't have guys, like you said, connecting on real things, right? It's all surface level, it's drinking buddies, it's, sports friends, it's your work colleagues, right? But it's not like real deep connection.
Correct. Yep. Which is necessary. Yep.
Critical.
And
yep.
so the other myth, Mark, is they say, oh, men don't talk. Black men don't share. Black men share. They're very selective on who they share with, right? They don't have the luxury of really, really going deep on it. But most black men I know, even the ones that say, I don't have anybody to talk to, when I challenge that, like anybody, because oftentimes they have at least one person, they just hadn't exercised the privilege of saying, hey, I need to talk with you.
If you're enjoying the podcast so far, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us to reach more men and inspire them to become the best versions of themselves. Thank you for your support. And now back to the show.
Yeah, let me ask you this question. And, I say misspeak, like definitely correct me, right? But my understanding is that a lot of black men have had cultural erasure, right? They've been disconnected from their roots, whether that's their African roots or Caribbean roots or whatever it may be, and I wonder what your thoughts are on that, if there's a role in kind of going back to more traditional cultural structures that were community-based. Because when you were talking about that American dream, right, like the wife, the kids, the house, the dog, the whatever, right, like that's the white American dream, right? Like that's like I'm just curious, like what the black version of that is, and if there's a way that the community can be better supported.
That's an awesome question with context, Mark. I appreciate that. So it really vacillates, right? So we've been sold, obviously we live in this country on the American dream, which is, based on white values and systems, correct? But from a humanities standpoint, we all want to be healthy and happy, right? We all want to be safe, secure, healthy, and happy. Black men have been penalized and criminalized for their blackness, for their culture, right? And so we've had to learn how to assimilate, code switch. All of that becomes exhaustive. Most of the anxiety and stress that comes from being a black male in white spaces is due to racism. It's racism-induced stress and anxiety. It's not imposter syndrome. It's not any to worry about. No, it's the cost of being black in all majority white spaces. And so we have to go along to get along, and we lose ourselves. Like, we're clear with the culture. Like, we know that we've invented most things. We know hip hop. We know our African heritage. We're clear about the culture. Do we have outlets to really delve into the culture? No. Right? Because the culture aspects that we have in this country have been co-opted and hijacked into white spaces. Right? And so it's almost like, how do I keep it real? How do I be black? How do I be authentically myself? So here's the thing, though. After going through that, somewhere around your 30s or 40s, you become simply exhausted. You become exhausted. And the society will label that as mental, right? You have a mental health challenge, but it's really emotional exhaustion. I'm just tired in the body of carrying all of these emotions unresolved.
Yeah, so people tend to like get disaffected, I'm hearing, right, and disconnect. So how can they reconnect, right? How can they reconnect with their cultural heritage?
I actually think we've done a better job, right? We have online, we have access to information that can keep us connected, right? The challenge with that is some of us become overly connected and overly stimulated, but we do have means to really stay plugged in to quality podcasts like the Men's Therapy Podcast and other things. So the information and outlet are there, right? We have to do a better job of spreading the word on which outlets really, really serve us, not just short term, but long term, right? And then there's some community things, right? One of the things that I promised myself every year is to become more offline and do more in the community, like allow males to see me of all ages, right? It's something to see a black male psychologist who wears a cap and hoodies and sweatpants and got 100, 200 pair of Jordans that's really saying, hey, I'm just like you. As a matter of fact, I'm still on the healing journey, and I can help you. Because one of the things that Black males are clear about is we don't hear everybody who ain't been through what we've been through. It doesn't, because unhealed ears don't hear well. So I'm not even internalizing what you're saying, whether you're Black or white, because you don't know me. You don't know what I'm going through. Right? And so it's a disconnect. You could be Black power Black, but if somehow they don't resonate with you, they're like, you're not my guy. Black males need to say, you're my guy.
Yeah.
And they always do. It's from the sports world, crime, drug game. Like, that's how it goes with us. We're clear from a tribal standpoint. We're clear about hierarchy, even spiritually and emotionally. We're clear about that. We have the ability to size up a person immediately because we've had to use it to survive.
Yeah, can you say more about that? That's interesting. I've never heard that before. Like, what is that kind of system like?
Correct. It's instinctual, right? We are, even when we build beautiful lives, we have to really practice not being in survival mode, Mark. Right? So if we walk into a restaurant, we are naturally, surveying the landscape, right? We're looking for any threats to ourselves within any environment. And we become hypersensitive and hypervigilant, more so in survival. Now, I work with some prominent people, right? They don't have money issues. They live in a lavish lifestyle, and they still operate in survival mode. Why? Because it is the effect of being Black in this country.
I guess it's a big question, but like, will that change? Like, do you think that'll change? Or is racism just kind of like baked in, Yeah,
probably not, right?
Yeah.
Probably not. And it doesn't, we'd like it to change, but it doesn't have to change to the degree that we have to learn how to operate within the current system as best we can. We just do. Right? We could do more pushing against the machine than healing, and find ourselves exhausted and discouraged on a whole different level. I remind Black males just to start at home within you for now. The world won't get easier. You will become better at managing your reactions to the things that happen to you from the world.
Yeah. I think there's taking accountability piece. I guess another question I have for you, right? Like, the working definition I have for what differentiates a boy from a man, right, is that a man takes responsibility for everything in his life, right? Even though it might not be his fault, he still has to take responsibility for how it's impacting him and how he can heal. So I'm curious, for the Black male experience, like, there are real victimizing forces, right? There's oppression, there's racism, there's the slavery history, right? I mean, there's real things where, that society was victims. So I'm curious, how do you speak about that to Black men, and how do you help them, or do you help them, I guess, to overcome that victim mentality? Because I think it's justified, but I think it ultimately keeps you held back, It
does. So that's great, actually, Mark. So there's an approach that I adopted from sort of the improv world. And there's a concept called yes and, right? Yes and. Yes, this happened. Yes, this is real. Yes, this is true. Yes, it's a fact. And for now, we must figure out how to be responsible. So it becomes coexisting in co-independence as opposed to codependence. What I really find that's helpful for Black males is to take what mainstream mass consciousness has said and sort of interpret it on a level that they can receive it. Let me give you an example, right? So let's use the word responsibility, right? And so Black males have been hearing since kindergarten, first, second grade, you need to be more responsible. Keep your toys, finish your homework, sit up straight, right? And so we've become numb to words and phrases that have been overused and weaponized against us. But when I stand up looking like them and I say your ability to respond, that's respond ability, right? So we need to work on the skill set so that you can respond differently. Then it clicks. They're like, oh, okay, well, why nobody didn't tell us that? That's why I'm here. So what we need to do is increase our ability to respond without pushing so hard on the machine. That's the yes and concept. That's one way. The other way is when it comes to accountability. The synonym for accountability is support. You cannot be held accountable unless you have support systems. And that's the part we don't speak on. We want black males to be accountable without the support.
Yeah.
I can't be accountable.
Yeah.
I can't be accountable for showing up at work if there's not a time clock to punch and I know I'm getting paid.
Yeah. 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 If you have, or people that will say, hey man, like I missed you yesterday. Where were you? Right. I mean, like, I think everyone needs that level of support and accountability just to like, cause no one's an island, right? Which I think is what you're talking about before.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, we were talking about that. I guess I want to bring you back earlier in your story. You talked about working in the education system, right? And I know there's a huge like wealth disparity in African-American education, right? There's a lack of resources, funding, like it's a massive problem. I guess my question is, one, can you speak on that? Like what's it like now if you're still plugged in? And two, like what do you think we need to reach like younger black youth, right? We're talking high school, middle school, you know?
Yeah. It's a lot, right? There's obviously wealth disparities, right? Yeah. There's obviously, I was fortunate enough to be bused from a lower income to an upper mid income of school. So I had a unique journey educationally. And so I felt obligated to bring back the schooling that I received on the other side of town to my buddies in the hood with me, right? And so I became, which really got me an education, right? I wanted to be the conduit from taking, you know, complex concepts and breaking them down because I knew the brilliance with the guys on the streets. I know the brilliance of the black boys in the neighborhoods, right? They're just as brilliant, right? They have different learning styles, the information has some, but the genius is there, right? And they know that, right? But they are discouraged in traditional public education. So I happened to be nerdy and street at the same time. So I was able to serve as that bridge, right? And so when I got an education on the same side of town that I was raised in, what I found is it's not so much, obviously there's the economic disparities, but it's the expectations, right? It's everybody rises and falls to the expectations. So if the school system doesn't expect certain things, right, then the kids will rise or fall to the expectations, right? I've been in schools where there were exceptional resources, right? But then there weren't quality teachers, right? The number one determining factor for student achievement is an effective teacher, right? An effective teacher can teach well with zero resources. I've actually done it. Right. If you're an effective teacher, you care, you resonate, you can get over concepts and tap within in some of the most challenging situations. So it's a combination of things, right? And I'm not minimizing, obviously, property taxes and, you know, wealth disparities on how central offices and counties distribute funds to certain schools. I'm obviously well versed in that. But what I also know is it takes a quality teacher, black, white, male, female, that really taps into the genius of young people, regardless of where they're taught, right? And I tell people all the time, my favorite teacher was a white male. My favorite teacher was a white male. As a matter of fact, I had him for 5 years in a row in elementary school, right? I had him from 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade as a homeroom teacher. And the way that he held space for all of us, particularly me and other black boys, I said, yeah, I want to do that. And he wasn't a black male, but I knew his commitment to education, and I got that from him. And so it goes back to one of the earlier points, Mark, like you can't get it all from one man, but you can get what you get, right? So extract, sort of like that Build-A-Bear concept, right? And so for me, you know, I said, yeah, I'm going to take what I got from this white male. I'm going to take all this information, I'm going to take it back to my community, and I'm going to empower black boys who don't have the privilege to go outside of the neighborhood to become educated. And I live by that principle, right? I stay connected to the grounds roots because it was a difference maker for me.
Yeah. Well, what type of community organizations are you doing now? Like, how are you still connected to lower income communities?
So I do a lot of mentoring, right? Anybody, and I know a lot of people's doing quality work here. So I do favors, I partner up. I'm working with a gentleman of mine who runs a nonprofit. They're doing group counseling in school systems. I work with all males, right? I'm never not working with black males, right? Since I left the schoolhouse, right? The only reason I left the schoolhouse is because of the boxed in, right, corporate approach, the bureaucracies. But I live my life on really being available to black males of all ages. And I think I do a pretty good job of doing that.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. You know, if there's a black male listening to this podcast, right, like, what would you say to them directly, you know, to maybe hopefully motivate them to do some of this self-development work?
Allow yourself to be reintroduced to a part of you that you either forgot or simply just didn't know was there, right? Therapy is one of the greatest gifts one could bestow upon oneself. And just like anything, just try it out, right? You may have to go through quite a few practitioners. And let's be clear, therapy is not as accessible as we like to think, right? It's very popular and trending now, but it's not, right? There are plenty of men who cannot afford it. The benefits don't support it. There's a lot of barriers that keep black males in particular from going into therapy, right? All of them are open to it. Not all of them. Most of the ones that I come in contact, they're open to it conceptually. Like, yeah, I don't mind that, but how? I can't afford it, my benefits. But every minute I don't have days off work. Do they know me? Do I have to spill out everything? Tell them my deep, dark secret. It's only when it becomes rock bottom do we find ourselves being mandated to go to therapy, right? Majority of the men who come see me are almost mandated, right? Either through their marriages or their families or through outside agencies, right? It gets really bad for men to call me, right? It gets really bad, generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking. So instead of waiting for them to call me and come, I go to them. I go to male groups and I share things publicly, right? To let men know, okay, y'all don't come to me, I'm coming to y'all. And as a result of me going to them, then they feel comfortable saying, let me get your number. How can I work with you?
Yeah, like that's why I want to ask that question, right? Is because I see the same thing. It's guys, I mean, it's your story, right? In many ways, like it's a divorce, you know, it's a drug overdose, it's losing their job, it's a big fight with their kids. It's like something that like has really gotten out of hand. And I would love to just brainstorm ways to like get guys in proactively because, you know, I'm hoping it doesn't have to get so bad for us to look at doing counseling and talking to somebody. But I do see that is really the overwhelming trend, you know.
It is. And you said it, Mark. Two major areas that men come to see me is they had a breakdown in their relationships or in their finances. Those are the two major ones. I think to become better at share with men, I think we're doing it, right? Podcasts like this, there's several great things moving where men are being open and honest, right? And so other men could really hear, right? There's 8 billion of us on the globe. Some men can only get it the way Mark gives it. Some men can only get it the way Kurt gives it. We all could just do a little consistently to make sure that we're available, that for the men who resonate with us, they don't have to work hard at finding us. We're doing the work where we're available, whether it's Mark, Kurt, or Kurt and Mark. And so I tell men just to stay consistent. We know what being consistent and disciplined is. We all learn how to walk, talk, potty train, shoot the jump shot, run the we know what it means to practice. You don't have to be fully licensed and credentialed to hold space for men. Men could learn from your story on what not to do. Men could get hope from how you made it through. And so as there's mediums like this, Mark, that really keeps the hope. Because the two things that keep men from really seeing the light at the end of the tunnel is helplessness and hopelessness. If they could get help by way of listening to Mark's podcast, or they could get some hope by way of listening to me or my story, then they could go another day. My job is to get, when men can't see today, I ask them to go another moment, right? Men call me every month saying, hey, I was scrolling and somehow I came across your TED Talk and I heard your story. And I said, that's why I did the talk. I didn't do the talk to become rich and famous. I did the talk so in the middle of the night, when you're scrolling, considering about ending it all, that you see me on stage saying, I've been there and you're not alone.
Yeah, we need that as much as possible. And I agree. I think it's happening more and more. I think men are opening up more. And I think we're having way more, just platforms for being real, right? I mean, there's also negative stuff on the internet, right, about masculinity, but I think like there is a second wave of this movement. I think it was popular in the 90s, early 2000s. It kind of died for a while, and now it's kind of coming back, where guys are starting to like talk about the real shit and actually be open about their fears. I kind of had a question for you around that too, where you talked about how the divorce is, and the kind of life falling apart, right? The griefs, the loss of job, homelessness, right? Like this kind of like spiral. If I can encourage you to go a level deeper, like what hard truths did you learn about yourself in that process? Because I do think those things can be like big mirrors for us when we hit those rock bottoms.
Yeah, I learned two things. I learned that I had a level of resilience that I didn't know I had. And I also learned forgiveness. Right? I had to forgive a lot of people, mostly myself. And I had to forgive myself ongoing, right? I promised, I made certain promises and plans coming up that I wouldn't do certain things, right? I wouldn't, and when life went the way life, I obviously took it personal, right? It was my life, but I learned forgiveness. I learned that I did what I did based on where I was at the time. I learned the people who I thought hurt me, that on some level I signed up for it, right? It wasn't no time to play victim, right? No one forced themselves into my life. Everybody came in my life, I invited them in, right? And so sometimes we could choose wrong or stay long, but what we can't do is expect to heal by way of playing victim. Every week I talk to a man, he's still stuck in the victim part, right? And it's right, he's still going down. He's still outsourcing the very things he needs to work on internally, right? And so I've been there, right? I've been there. And I tell him, to the degree that you're outsourcing and playing victim, right? That's going to guarantee how long you stay stuck in this ditch. I almost bet. Right? And so, yeah, I learned resilience on a whole different level. They taught me how to think on my feet, right? I made a bunch of money at a time, right? I bought the house and the cars. I had the pretty wife and the beautiful, healthy kids. Like I did it. I won on certain levels, right? My peers were proud. My family was proud. The community was proud. But they didn't teach me that emotional stuff. So when the feelings and the emotions came, I'm like, how do I do this? There's no self-help book, right? There's no, right? I really, really had to dig deep, and I felt powerless, right? And so it wasn't until I surrendered and let it all crumble, Mark, is when things got better. And I'm not suggesting that men do this approach. That's just my approach. Once I got tired of banging my head against the wall, right? Then I said, all right, I surrender. I'm done, right? I actually was like, I'm not making any sudden moves. I can't afford to because I can't take any more losses. I'm going to take the losses I got and I'm going to be still for a while. And it took me about 5 years to get out of this slump. It took a good 5 years to get out, to recover emotionally, financially. It took a long time.
Yeah, it's really slow. It's really slow. I want to ask you more about surrender. So, little story about me, right? It's like I'm recovering from drug abuse, been in AA groups for a long time. I'm over 10 years sober now. And surrender was a huge part of that. Surrendering to being powerless against the addiction, surrendering to my own kind of victim mentality. I mean, I learned the same thing, that I was a massive victim and it was just bleeding my power and my strength and my energy into other people. I had to surrender, to my relationships and actually ask for help. It was big, right? But I think for a lot of guys, and this, a question for you is like, surrender can sound like giving up. It can sound like just getting like dominated, or it can sound like submission, maybe is a better word for it. But in your own words, like, how would you describe surrender? Because I think there is something really, really critical about that in order for any healing to start.
Yeah, I had to make the distinction between giving up and surrendering. And so for surrendering means to rest. Surrendering means not to do nothing like let it all crumble, although I took that approach. Surrender to me is to just like be okay sitting with the heavy emotions when it really burned like hell. Like I had to become in shape to withstand heavy emotions, right? I trained my body and my mind to really finish feeling bad or feeling whatever the emotion is, right? And that took a long time, right? Because, we do a lot of avoidance and numbing and soothing externally. Drugs, alcohol, porn, sex, overworking, you name it, right? Self-help books. We all use an approach to sort of help us soothe or to avoid some things. Well, I promised myself that when I come out of this, whatever it was, not if, but when, I wanted to have less recovery to do as possible, right? I didn't want to have the alcohol, the drugs, the porn, right? Let me just do the mental and emotional thing for now, right? And so I just had to choose, right? And I've always been pretty good at sort of picking the lesser of two evils, sort of. And so surrender for me was do very little and then take approaches, right? And I've had that. So I did a thing like make one promise to myself a day. So every day I'd make one promise, whether it was 30 push-ups or making my bed or meditating, and I just racked up 7 promises a week, right? That was me trusting myself, right? Just whatever it is. So once I started trusting myself, then I had to sort of start pushing myself, come on, bro, we got stuff to do now. We really building some momentum here. Now, sometimes I'd fall off and be up all night, right? Sometimes I'd make some bad moves and have to clean up some stuff. But I really got to about 80% mastery. And this is what I teach men. The 20% I'm human, right? I'm looking to mess it up 20% of the time. But I'm shooting for 80% success rate without being hard on myself. So surrendering was allowing life to life without forcing my agenda, right? And when it doesn't feel good, just wait. Just wait. Sometimes it's 2 minutes, sometimes it's 2 days, but I practice waiting. And it got easy.
Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you wanted to open up, but you were afraid that it wouldn't be taken well? You ask yourself, what's the point? Nothing's going to change anyway. So you do what you always do. You push it down, numb out the pain with a drink, a night out, or pornography. I've been there myself, and I know that men lack the outlets for emotional expression, which is why I founded Men's Therapy Online, a healing hub for men's mental health. If you've been knocked on your ass or just crave meaningful connection, join Men's Therapy Online, a community of men who just get it. We offer individual therapy, men's groups, and powerful retreats, all led by licensed therapists. At Men's Therapy Online, we will help you to get back on your feet and take your life to the next level. Start your journey today at menstherapy.online.
Yeah, say more about that, right? Because I think that doesn't get talked about enough. It's just legitimately feeling your feelings. For me, I have a meditation background, so I learned it through that. There's also kind of somatic psychotherapy where you learn it through that. But yeah, speak a little bit to actually feeling your feelings. Because I think as guys, we just, like you said, we numb it out with whatever our substance or behavior pattern is, or we just plow forward, or we just kind of swallow it and put it in our body somewhere. But feeling's pretty critical,
It is. Yeah, there's a number of ways, right? And mostly when I share different approaches, because I have to get it over slightly different depending on the man and the situation. But feeling the feelings is really allowing your emotions to speak to you as you speak to your emotions. Reminding men that their thoughts and their feelings are extensions of them, right? And the feelings are real, but the thoughts are always to be questioned, right? The thoughts are really an extensions. And we get to build this unique relationship with them. So I tell them my story. So when I'm feeling a certain way, the first thing I try to do, check in with myself, what is it that I'm feeling? Right? This is the basic teaching of becoming emotionally literate. What is it that I'm feeling? And sometimes it'll take a while, right? I'm all the way here. I've conditioned myself to feel angry, but I'm actually not angry, right? I'm irritated. I'm frustrated. I'm annoyed, but I ain't angry, right? So I didn't skip over 10 emotions, right? I'm just irritated. right? And when it becomes when I deduce it, like, are you irritated, frustrated? Like, what's that about? And usually after I identify the feeling, it always comes back to how well am I taking care of myself? See, any complaint, particularly for men, I tell men, to the degree that you're complaining is to the degree that you're really neglecting yourself. Now, I'm not suggesting you don't have the right to complain, but if you find yourself complaining about your wife, your girlfriend, your finances, there's something that you're dropping the ball on your self-care, right? Not to fix that, but for you to really be able to withstand certain things. So finishing the feeling for me was like just sitting there. So much so that when things were going well, on the norm that practice staying in front of my emotions. Like you said, Mark, meditating. So I get up, I start my day feeling, I end my day checking in, how I'm feeling, breathing, making friends with my feelings. It's the culmination of feelings that turn into the heavy emotions that makes the body emote. But if we just sit with the irritation, like I ain't angry, I'm just a little frustrated, it'll pass. Right? And yeah, I know how to relax, right? Just breathe it, like just sit with it. Like, because if I add this narrative, right, my voice keeps me in a hypervigilant state. So then I have to breathe and turn my voice off, right? My voice is to move things externally, but it doesn't work for me in terms of keeping me calm. So I gotta be quiet, right? I can't soothe myself with my voice on. I gotta be quiet. Once I identify to speak to the emotions, I ask the emotions, what do you need from me? Then the emotions said, we'll be done in about 90 seconds. Right? And then I'm like, okay, I got 120. Do your thing, feelings. And they do. I do more breathing. And if it's too heavy, I'll meditate. And if it doesn't pass, I don't fight it. So if I become overwhelmed, I make no major decisions. No major agreements, right? I just really, because I don't have it to give. So those are a lot of different strategies that I've practiced over the years of doing. Making friends with my feelings long before they start to emote.
Yeah, before they like come out sideways or control your life or make a bad decision, right? You're like talking with them ahead of time. And like we were talking about, I just want to kind of highlight this for our listeners, is like, I don't think therapy makes you happy. I think it makes you feel more. Right? It opens up the aperture and you're going to feel more and more and more. But that means you're not only going to feel happier, but you're also going to feel sadder. You're going to feel more angry. You're going to feel your feelings more. And I think for a lot of guys that can be overwhelming in the beginning, because what I found is the first feelings that have something to say are like anger, right? Or pain or fear. Joy and gratitude and, awe and all those like great ones, those take a while to kind of come to the surface. Did you see the same thing? That's often those kind of negative, painful feelings first?
It is, right? And I share that particularly through the intake, like, this is going to be rough. You're going to want to stop. We're not going to be, you're not going to like me, right? Like, there's going to be a lot of things to come up, right? There's no happiness, but there will be a level of fulfillment, right? Is what I share. Like, you're going to get to when we haven't been allowed or taught to feel, we find ourselves not even feeling as enjoyable or happy as we could, right? When we numb one feeling, we have a tendency of numbing them all. So most guys who are avoiding feeling bad don't even enjoy the things that used to make them really happy, right? And so we talk about like what's happy, what's joyful, we kind of really play around with them assigning names to what they're actually feeling, right? And then there's work to be done. So to your point, yeah, I'm not here to soothe you and lie to you and placate you. That's not what any of it is about. There are going to be some times where I got to come for you in the spirit of love, but I got to really, really push you. And then there's some things that will sort of click later on, like months down the line. In the shower, driving, talking with somebody, right? There's some things. But what you don't have to worry about is me sort of shrinking you, right? So, right, this is us counseling, right? Your input and my input, right? You're going to do the work for yourself, and I'm going to hold space, right? But I need you to know who you are on this level, and I have a few skills that I could help you with that. So I actually break down how the therapy and counseling is going to be uniquely for them. Uniquely for them. And I ask them, when the last time you really been happy? You know, like we go there, like, tell me the last time where you was like, man, like I could do this all day. And it be that, like, I don't know. You know, so yeah, I find that making sure a man, black, white, or whoever, has a level of emotional literacy that he could really start to support himself with that.
Yeah, and like come more alive, right? Yeah, that's the idea. It's like just to become more alive. Because like you said, there's so many men that are numb, that are zombies, right? That are just kind of like walking around or really tense. You know, you mentioned that anger. A lot of guys I think are really angry and are really holding on tightly in life. And therapy can really help to like just open up the aperture and feel more. You know, so for kind of our last question here, I'm curious. So, you know, masculinity, obviously fierce topic of debate. I think there's, you know, no doubt there's a crisis of masculinity. There's a lot of lost guys, a lot of disaffected guys, a lot of lonely guys. So in your opinion, like, what does a modern masculinity look like? Because I think we're realizing that the old version isn't serving us anymore. And there's a lot of voices out there of like what the new version or the evolved version, you know, needs to look like. So I'm curious whether that's for black men or men in general or whoever you want to address it to, but like, how would you define modern masculinity?
That's an awesome question, right? It's such a hot topic. You know, one of the things, and this is through practice and research and really just sort of being present in my own life, is that as men, we have to take the emphasis away from what it looks like and reassign on what it actually feels like, right? Because it's going to look different for different people at different times. But if we could all sort of narrow it down to what's masculinity feels like, then the question becomes, what's femininity feel like? And if we could sort of be in the space on how we all have both, and it's okay, without going outside of the body and worrying about if we're perceived as being masculine or lack thereof, if we're perceived as being too feminine or not feminine enough, right? And sort of really going on the inside, like, well, what does masculinity feel like to you? And so for me, it feels empowering. It doesn't feel aggressive. It doesn't feel forceful. It does feel powerful, right? It feels light. It feels childlike, not childish, right? It feels determined, you know, like it's a feeling that I ask men to do. Because they'll be caught up in debating externally on how they show up, which I think is more of it, right? We already have this perception of how we perceive by black, white, the world in general. So let's do an inventory, internal approach to what does masculinity feel like? And I work with all male groups where men stand up and share their story and they cry in a group of 60 to 100 men and still feel masculine. Straight, like I feel masculine lighter. I feel more man now in a group of strange men bawling my eyes out because I've told this that I've never told anyone. I feel empowered. I've been using force as a result of not sharing this. Now I get to feel empowered as a result of sharing it. That's it. So the question is not what does masculinity look like? I think the better question, Mark, is what does masculinity feel like?
Yeah, I think that's really, really well said. I like that, right? I like the idea of like light, open, powerful, playful, you know, these ways that like a guy can feel held and supported in a community of men and not have to fake it anymore, right? I think there's something very masculine about being just like raw and real and honest, right? And like not lying. So like even if your truth is crying, right? It's like it's real and like it commands respect, right? Because it's real. It's as real as it gets.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Mark. Absolutely. And men walk out of there changed. They walk out of there like, I can't believe how light I feel. What took me so long to get here?
Yeah, that's always the thing. Is like, again, they love it. It's just getting them there. That's why we're hopefully doing the show and trying to get the message out there. Is like, just try it, because again, once you experience it, I think it is life changing. But Dr. Kurt, really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on the Men's Therapy Podcast. Where can people find more about you and learn more about you online?
Thank you, Mark. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really, really enjoyed and respect your expertise, your perspective, your questions were top notch, the preparation and professionalism. Thanks for having me, man. Hopefully we could do this again. I appreciate you. I can be found online. I'm at drcurtisdjasper.com, Dr. Curtis D. Jasper on Facebook and Twitter. I'm still on Twitter. Most people interact with me on Instagram at I am Dr. Kurt. A Google search will bring it up. I pride myself on staying visible. I'm on a spiritual path in my life now. I just want to serve based on who I naturally am. And I'm open to meeting people who resonate with me for whatever their reasons are. And I'm happy to make new partnerships and collaborations such as what you and I have done. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. Thank you, man. Appreciate you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And listeners, reach out to him. So all the stuff will be in the show notes. We'll have all the handles there. Instagram sounds like that's the number one place to go if you can only pick one. Get the message out there. Send this episode to somebody, maybe a black man in your life that needs to hear another black male, a role model, a mentor, talk about some real shit. Be open, be honest, and talk about how going inward really helped to heal him and how he wants to help the world. So, do all the socials, like, share, subscribe, send it out there, spread the word. We're at Men's Therapy Online everywhere, Men's Therapy Podcast, all the podcast platforms. Leave us a review, check us out on YouTube, do all the stuff. You know what it is by now. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week, another episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. And don't forget to visit menstherapy.online to learn more about the work that we are doing to support and inspire men. Until next time, keep moving forward.